The first arrows left the bowstrings, tracing cold streaks of light across the sky. The Viking longship fleet had just made contact with the outer sea defenses of the Franks. The wind leaned against the sails, the sea foamed, and hundreds of oars sliced the water in unison. Each prow, carved into the gaping mouth of a dragon, surged forward like a pack of hunting beasts through the storm. On board, the Viking warriors formed a shield wall, the outer rank for cover, the inner rank drawing their bows. The first answering volley of arrows met the waves mid-range, forming a curtain of fire. Distant, the Frankish fleet returned fire with heavy-mounted crossbows, ballistae. Arm-thick bolts pierced the shields, embedding themselves into the mast with a shuddering rhythm. One warrior fell. The man next to him instantly dragged the body aside, holding the position. No one cried out. No one retreated. The Viking commander raised his axe, signaling with his hand. The second volley began fire arrows. The archers lit the oil-soaked tips, shot them rapidly toward the enemy fleet. From afar, sections of the sea glowed, the fire tracing vivid red arcs. The wind shifted. Fire spread across the water, carrying fragments of burning wood. The Frankish ships staggered, a few losing steering and colliding, their masts snapping down into the waves. But the Vikings weren't unscathed. A longship was hit broadside by an enemy ballista. Fire erupted from the oil stores, spreading along the wooden deck. The crew hurled buckets of seawater to douse the flames, but the fire was too deep. The helmsman sharply spun the ship, ramming it straight into an enemy vessel, turning his own burning ship into a weapon. The impact detonated in a burst of splintered wood, fire, and bodies flung into the smoke. Both ships vanished in the blaze, opening a massive gap for the formation behind to press forward. The longships in the rear simultaneously accelerated, oars chopping hard, splashing water like rain. The wind howled through the sails, yet the lines of dragon banners remained upright. Fire arrows crisscrossed the sky. Ships tilted, water washed over the decks. In that space, everything dissolved into two colors, the black of smoke and the red of fire. The Frankish defenses began to break. A cluster of ships became isolated, retreating in disarray. The Viking commander needed no further orders. The signal was clear. A black banner was hoisted on the prow, signaling a full-force charge. The entire fleet transitioned to a wedge formation, thrusting through the fiery wake where fire and ash mingled into dust. The first longships passed the barricade. Behind them, smoke blanketed the horizon. The sea was no longer blue, only a layer of gray foam bobbing over wreckage and iron. As the prows touched the shallows, the clang of metal ceased, replaced by the heavy, low sound of waves against rock. The Viking commander stood on his ship, looking at the land barely visible in the mist. He raised his axe, decisive. The landing order was issued. Row after row of warriors leaped into the water, axes in hand, feet pounding the waves. They stepped onto the shore as if onto a predestined battlefield. Far ahead, the walls of Paris were still obscured, but everyone knew beyond the mist lay the rest of the battle. Smoke still drifted ashore as the first longships beached on the sand. The water around them was red with embers, and the charred hulls still smoked. The Viking warriors leaped from the vessels. Shields were erected in a line, axes ready. They didn't wait for a command. The second battle began the moment their feet hit the ground. In front, the Franks lined up along the bank. They were few, but they had the terrain advantage. Archers occupied the high ground. Ballistae positioned behind wooden palisades. The first arrows fell, embedding themselves in the Viking shield wall, spitting small sparks. In response, the warriors in the rear drew their bows, firing back in volleys. The two sides shot over each other like two intersecting sheets of steel rain in the smoke, a hand signal. The Viking vanguard lowered their shields and charged. The sea wind whipped hard, driving salt spray into their faces, but their steps didn't slow. The Frankish spears dropped low, E-points waiting. When the two sides met, the initial impact shook the entire center line. Viking axes chopped straight through the spearmen. shattering the slender wooden shafts. Round shields smashed into faces. Swords followed axes. Everything blending into a single motion. Advance. Behind, a fresh group of Vikings landed. They dragged light wooden frames, preparing for field catapults. Onagers. Shield bearers covered them, moving through the smoke. A ballista bolt flew wide, lodging in an empty longship deck, sparking and thickening the smoke. The beach transformed into a narrow war zone, no longer distinguishing water and land. Only a strip of black and red. Another longship beached close by, dropping ropes for the reinforcement team. The new warriors, without resting, immediately joined the formation. Lines of axes and shields merged, forming a single thrust. The push from the rear staggered the entire Frankish line. A wooden barricade collapsed, opening a path inland. The Viking commander stepped toward the front line, axe still in hand. He didn't shout, simply raised his right hand. Instantly, the warriors stopped in unison, splitting the formation. One group held the left flank, the other quickly erected a temporary barricade with shields. A team dragged the catapult frame onto the sand, loading the first boulder. The leather ropes tautened. The wood groaned softly. When he lowered his hand, the rock flew, smashing directly into the defensive wooden tower, blowing away half of its wall. Smoke billowed high. Dust fell like rain. The Franks in the rear gradually withdrew, leaving figures in armor slumped on the sand. The Viking warriors did not pursue. They held the beach, consolidated their position, gathered weapons from the fallen, and reformed their ranks. The landing was complete. The shore now belonged to them. The Seine River ahead reflected the firelight from the burning hulks drifting by. The fleet offshore was closing in, the line of red dragon banners emerging through the smoke. The commander looked straight ahead, drawing a long line quickly in the sand with his knife, the direction of the advance on the city. The Seine revealed itself through the thinning smoke. The water was no longer blue, but murky with mud, ash, and blood spilled from the burning ships offshore. The longships followed one another, their oars churning hard, pushing black waves toward the interior. The dragon-headed prow led the column, its mouth wide open as if challenging the stone walls ahead. On both banks, the Franks had established new defenses. Wooden towers, pontoon bridges, and rows of sharpened stakes lined the narrow river stretch. Archers stood in formation, heavy crossbows on stands. As the Vikings came within range, the first volley of arrows fell like a rain of nails. Bolts lodged in shields, sparking and sinking deep into the wet wood. The sound of wind sliced across the ships, but the rowing didn't stop. The Viking commander signaled with his hand. The archers in the rear stood straight, drew their bows, and returned fire. Oil-soaked arrows traced long streaks of fire across the sky. The right bank ignited first, then spread to the pontoon bridge. A series of explosions erupted. The Frankish defensive oil barrels caught fire, the flames sweeping across the wooden towers. The entire bank became a ring of fire, clearly illuminating every smoke-stained Viking face. The Viking vanguard adjusted course, concentrating their full force on the center. 3 longships ran parallel, prow to prow, turning the formation into a blade. Ahead, a wooden barrier spanned the river. When only dozens of meters away, all oars lowered, and the acceleration surged like a tidal wave. The impact shattered the barrier, splinters flying like rain. Warriors with iron grappling hooks secured the stakes, pulling the entire barrier to one side, opening the passage for the column behind. The left bank echoed with the sound of ballista fire. A giant bolt pierced the hull, causing water to flood in. The captain signaled the crew to retreat, but the helmsman swung the prow sideways, turning the sinking ship into a shield for the column behind. They stayed, holding position until the fire completely consumed the vessel. When the ship finally sank, the gap was wide enough for the Viking column to pass. The remaining longships poured through the opening. The Frankish fleet ahead broke apart, dozens of defensive boats retreating in chaos. One Viking ship rammed straight into a floating watchtower, collapsing the structure with its dragon prow. A column of black smoke billowed high, spreading across the river. The chanting needed no translation. It was the only sound existing between fire and water. As the Seine widened, the water calmed, and the stone walls of Paris became clearly visible. The iron gate was tall and thick, the watchtowers stacked like the armor of a sleeping beast. The Viking warriors rested their oars, allowing the current to carry them. They observed, counted the sentry posts, and measured the distance with their eyes. The commander drew a small knife, carving a single symbol onto the mast, the iron gate. The wind shifted, carrying the smell of smoke and burned earth. On the water, the fleet lined up side by side, all prows facing the city wall, silent yet resolute, like a row of giant spears about to plunge straight into the heart of this land. The first longships touched the riverbank at the foot of the walls of Paris. Smoke from the burning towers still covered the water, blurring the line between river and land. As the prows hit the mud, the Viking warriors instantly jumped down. They stomped onto the wet mud, shields held, ready, axes poised. Row after row spread out, forming ranks before the gray stone wall towering above. From the Frankish side, a trumpet call sounded. Long spears were lowered from the wall's edge. Ballistae were reloaded constantly. The first arrows fell, embedding themselves in the Viking shield wall, sparking dryly. Not a single man backed down. When the first rain of arrows ended, the shield wall separated, and the axe storm began. The Viking vanguard crouched low, running through the dust and smoke. Heavy axes hacked horizontally at the wooden barricades, shattering them piece by piece. Round shields slammed into the base of the spears, clearing a path for comrades behind to surge forward. The Franks tried to hold their positions, pouring boiling oil from the high wall, but the pressure from the hundreds of warriors below shook the entire defense line. Each Viking push dislodged more small stones from the wall, as if the wall itself knew it was being slowly defeated. A team of Vikings dragged small catapults ashore. They moved under a slanted shield formation, forming a mobile roof. Leather ropes were tightened, the first boulder placed on the tray. A dry boom echoed. The heavy stone flew straight, hitting the wall, leaving a deep dent. The wall trembled. Stone fragments rained down. From above, the Franks countered with ballistae. One Viking warrior was hit in the chest, collapsing, but the machine didn't stop. Another immediately took his place, pulling the rope, loading the second shot, on the left. The Viking shield team covered the warriors. On the right, the remaining longships moved closer to the bank, firing support. Oil-soaked arrows from the ships shot diagonally onto the wall, setting small wooden towers alight, crippling the defense's firing points. Smoke and fire intertwined, obscuring the Frankish view, giving the axe teams a chance to close in. The Viking commander stood in the heart of the battlefield, observing with a cold gaze. He signaled, and the axe ranks stopped. A small group advanced, carrying ropes and iron hooks. When the hook points embedded themselves in the stone crevices, they hauled themselves up, meter by meter. Below, comrades continued to block the arrow rain. One man slipped, fell, hit a shield, and vanished in the smoke. But the climb didn't stop. The others kept ascending, fast and sure, like a pack of hunting animals. When the third boulder was fired, a large crack appeared in the main city wall. A section of the brick collapsed, dust curling into a column of smoke. The Franks retreated up the high towers, leaving the area at the base of the wall for the Vikings to occupy. The vanguard immediately poured into the gap, forming a temporary barricade with their shields. The entire area shook slightly under the bombardment. The wind swept the smoke toward the city, obscuring the sun. The Viking commander drew his axe from his belt, striking the shield in front of him 3 times. The sound echoed through the ranks, the signal to prepare for a total assault. The wall was cracked. The first defense line was down. Before them lay the enormous iron gate, the final layer of the city of Paris. The riverbanks slightly trembled under the weight of dozens of war machines just assembled. The Vikings called them Odin's Arms giant wooden frames, leather ropes tightly wrapped around bronze axles, the cradle ends holding head-sized boulders. Every movement was timed to a beat, no shouting, no wasted motion. On the muddy, ash-covered ground, the Viking warriors moved like a living metal machine. The commander walked through the ranks, axe held level. When he raised his hand, the first wooden arm jerked back violently. The stone shot out, smashing straight into the already cracked city wall. The sound echoed like thunder. The wall shuddered, layers of earth and stone falling like dirty snow. The Viking warriors did not cheer. They simply continued loading the next shot. Each dry boom was the heartbeat of the entire campaign. From above, the Frankish ballistae retaliated. Iron bolts nearly a meter long fell like spears from the sky. A Viking warrior was hit straight in the chest, falling beside the catapult base. The man next to him dragged the body out, filled the gap, placed a new stone on the tray, pulled the rope, and rotated the axle. There was no time to stop. Each individual, each team, operated with cold precision. The riverbank began to flood with smoke. The longships offshore moved closer, turning their prows to mount long-range ballistae. Oil-soaked arrows launched high, striking the tops of the watchtowers. Fire spread along the wooden barricades, reflecting red on the water. The city wall was no longer gray, but tinged with an orange glow, as if burning from within. Another shot boomed. The stone was larger than usual, wrapped in oil-soaked cloth. Upon hitting the wall, it exploded into a fireball, blowing apart an entire section of bricks. Frankish soldiers on the tower fell with the blast, their cloaks smoking. The main wall of Paris cracked like an eggshell. Immediately, the Viking commander lowered his hand. The axe teams and heavy hammer teams advanced. They moved through the smoke, carrying grappling hooks and rope ladders. Behind them, the small catapults shifted angle, concentrating fire on the iron gate area. Each shot slammed down, focusing force to break the hinges. Every impact was a tremor throughout the city. From above, the Franks tried to fight back with boiling oil and debris. Small drops of fire fell, burning on the wet armor, but the Vikings kept climbing. One man's tunic caught fire, yet he continued to cling to the rope until his axe reached the wall's edge. When his hand let go, the next man had already passed, stepping over his shoulder, continuing the ascent. No one stopped. No one called a name. The gate-breaking team in the center hammered the hinges. The sound of shattering metal mingled with the collapse of stone. The iron gate cracked. The crossbar broke. Smoke poured through the gap. A Viking warrior thrust his axe through, striking hard at the final horizontal beam. The gate burst open, the wall collapsing with the final roar of the catapults behind. Smoke and dust covered the ground. The Viking commander raised his axe, pointing toward the newly opened breach in the wall. No spoken command was needed. The shield ranks instantly changed formation, axes and spears lowered. They stepped through, slow but sure, over the still hot ashes. The wall was breached. The gate was down. Before them lay the inside of Paris, a land that, until today, no northern army had set foot in. And now, as the catapults fell silent, the new silence was truly terrifying. It signaled that victory was only a breath away. Before the smoke could clear, the Viking axe ranks poured through the breach. The wind from the river blew in, swirling dust and ash into a gray vortex, sweeping straight into the city. The ground shook under the first steps. The shield wall spread into a wedge, pointing straight toward the square where the remaining Franks were attempting to set up a final line of defense. The rapid clash of metal was immediate. In front, the Viking heavy hammer team smashed straight into the pile of rubble, blocking the way. One powerful strike was enough to send the entire barricade flying. Bricks, wood, and bodies were hurled away, opening a space for the axe ranks to flood in. Each warrior surged forward, shield raised, axe sweeping horizontally. The defense could no longer hold formation. Some retreated toward the storehouses. Others were cornered against the walls. cut down before they could retaliate. From above, the Franks launched ballista bolts. Large arrows pierced through 2 men, embedding deep into the ground. No one stopped to drag the bodies away. The surviving warriors simply held their shields tighter, pushing onward. A longship offshore fired support, a volley of fire arrows dropping onto the city wall, creating a thick screen of flame. Black smoke covered the defenders' retreat path. They were squeezed between 2 lines of fire, forced to drop their shields. The Viking commander walked through the formation, axe held across his chest. He didn't speak, only signaled. The warriors in the rear immediately advanced, dragging another small catapult into the city. The machine was placed right amidst the wreckage, loaded with stone, and aimed. The first shot blew down the right watchtower. The sound of the collapse echoed like a signaling drum. The remaining Frankish soldiers gathered around the central square. They formed a crescent-shaped battle line, their backs against the large church wall. When the Vikings appeared from the smoke, they fired their final volley of arrows. The arrows fell short, many sticking into the ground. The resistance was spent. The Viking axe ranks pressed in, shields slamming, axes chopping, pushing the enemy step by step into the corner. The last defenders dropped their weapons, bowing their heads amidst the smoke and dust. The catapults ceased firing. On the walls, the fire still burned, but no one was putting it out. The Viking commander stood in the center of the square, silently looking at the collapsed iron gate behind him. That massive door, once considered impenetrable, now lay tilted like the carcass of a beast. He raised his hand, signaling the soldiers to stop. The clang of steel on steel ended. In that silence, only the sound of the wind whistling through the shattered wall breaches remained. The Viking warriors dropped their shields, lining them up in a row. A few sat down, wiping their axes with scorched rags. No one spoke a word. They knew they had secured the city's gateway, but the battle was not entirely over. Deeper inside the center of Paris still held a garrison. The commander drew his axe from his belt, plunging it hard into the stone pavement. A dry thud resonated throughout the square. That was the only signal. The entire team stood up. The ranks reformed, shields hoisted onto shoulders, waiting for the next order. Before them, the great church appeared in the smoke, its dark roof tiles, its tall bell tower half hidden in the clouds. That was the heart of the city, and the final target. The iron gate was burst open. The wall was down. Now, there was only one path straight into the center, where the Viking banner would be planted on the highest stone before nightfall. As the Viking axe ranks crossed the square, the smoke was so thick, the sky was no longer visible. Everything was enveloped in the gray of ash and the red of fire. The great church emerged like a massive stone block amidst the ruins. The main wooden doors were tightly shut, surrounded by the last Frankish warriors, their armor dented, shields scorched, eyes sunken from exhaustion. They had no way out, but still gripped their weapons as if death on the spot was easier than surrender. The Viking commander observed in silence. A nod. The shield rank in front immediately advanced. Steps, even like a drumbeat. The church doors rattled as heavy hammers pounded them. A second time. The hinges burst. Fire from outside poured in, illuminating the tall stone columns within. The clash of steel resumed short, dry, precise. Each strike a man falling. The Frankish guard retaliated with everything left. They used spears, short swords, even fragments of burning wood to fight back. But the Vikings didn't retreat. They blocked with shields, chopped horizontally, chopped vertically, advancing step by step into the heart of the church. Bricks shattered underfoot. Stone dust flew blindingly. When the firelight reached the altar, the final resistance broke. The surviving defenders were pushed back, cornered in the shadows. There was no negotiation. There was no mercy. Only silence after the final axe blow. Above, the bell tower still stood, but smoke was pouring out of the small windows. The Viking commander looked up, then signaled. 10 warriors separated from the formation, carrying ropes and iron hooks. They began to climb. The stone wall was slippery with ash and oil. Every step a challenge. One man slipped, fell, his body hitting the roof tiles, then vanishing in the smoke. No one stopped. The next man grabbed the rope, climbing on. At the foot of the tower, the remaining soldiers shot a few arrows up. Everyone missed, breaking midair. The fire was close to the walls. Smoke billowed thickly, staining the entire church roof dark black. When the first man reached the edge of the railing, he hooked the rope onto a stone protrusion, pulling his comrades up. They vanished into the smoke for a few more minutes. Then a figure reappeared, holding a long, rolled-up object. The arm swung hard. The Viking banner unfurled amidst the smoke, the red cloth with the black dragon flying in the hot wind. Firelight shone through every fold, making it glow like a piece of red-hot steel. Down in the square, the entire Viking team stopped, looking up. No one cheered, no one roared. They just stood still, breathing in the smoke, as if the fire itself was singing for them. A bell-breaking sound echoed. The top of the tower cracked. The bronze bell fell, hitting the roof tiles, exploding into 1,000 fragments. But the banner remained. It flew, strong and clear, like a red cut on the gray sky. The surviving Franks looked up, bowing their heads. No surrender command was needed. They dropped their weapons onto the stone, the clanging metal fading to silence. The Viking commander advanced to the center of the square, where ash fell in thin layers. He looked up at the stone tower, where the flag still fluttered. His hand rested on his axe hilt, his head nodding slightly. The battle was over. Paris had fallen. And amidst what was once a symbol of faith, the red dragon banner of the Northmen flew a sign that no wall, no god, was strong enough to halt their steps. The smoke had begun to thin, but the smell of ash was still heavy in the air. The whole city of Paris was shrouded in the gray of dust and the red of the last embers. The Seine flowed silently past the foot of the shattered walls, reflecting dozens of longships anchored in the murky water. On board, Viking warriors wiped blood from their axes, replaced bowstrings, and adjusted their armor. No one spoke. This silence was not exhaustion, but the discipline of the victorious. Inside the city, the armies dispersed according to their assigned formations. One group collected the enemy's weapons and armor. Another checked the still-standing buildings. Every wooden chest, every silver coffer, every piece of valuable armor was dragged to the square, stacked in rows. A team of soldiers counted, marking each item. To the Vikings, this was not just looting, it was the ritual after victory. Everything was accounted for, divided equally, without argument. At the church, the doors remained open. Inside, firelight cast shadows on the cracked walls. The Viking commander walked in, his armor still smoke-stained. He walked between the scorched stone columns, unhurried, not looking around. When he reached the center of the main hall, he stopped, drew his axe from his belt, and plunged it hard into the brick floor. The dry sound echoed throughout the empty space. The gesture needed no explanation. Paris belonged to the Northmen. Outside the square, the warriors stood straight in formation. Some were tending to each other's wounds. Others were carrying the bodies of comrades to place by the ships. There were no cries, no funerals. For them, falling in this battle was the highest reward granted by Odin. The wind from the river blew in, carrying ash and dust, sweeping past the shield wall. The red flag on the stone tower still flew, smoke coiling around it like a crown of fire. As the sun set, the Viking fleet began to move. Each longship docked near the collapsed gate, soldiers lining up to transfer the spoils onto the ships, coffers of gold, barrels of provisions, weapons, and rare artifacts the Franks had hidden. Everything was done in silence. Only the heavy sound of wood hitting the ship's side. Under the evening light, the smoke-covered ships gradually became clear, the red dragon banners reflecting on the water like a trail of blood stretching to the horizon. The commander stood at the head of the quay. He looked back at the city behind the ruined buildings. the half-burned walls, the tilted roof tiles. For a moment, he said nothing. Then, he turned, stepping onto the leading longship. As his foot touched the deck, hundreds of oars dropped into the water in unison, creating a steady, rhythmic sound like a departure drum. From afar, Paris was just a blurred mass of ash. The wind blew in reverse, carrying the smoke faintly out to sea. The Vikings did not look back. They had come, they had fought, and they had taken everything. The saga needed no retelling, only the mark of ash still on the stone walls and the red dragon banner still flying in the wind. As night covered the Seine, the longship fleet gradually vanished into the darkness. The fire on the banks still burned, reflecting on the water like inverted stars. The Battle of Paris was over no cheers, no vows. Only the heavy breath of the conquerors and the steady sound of the oars in the night, the heartbeat of the Viking Empire, echoing in the silence of a world just subdued.